Well, yes, we want to talk about vines today. Why do we use vines?
Space.
If you can't go up, you can. If you can't go out, you can go up, right? So if you have limited lateral space, consider a vine. So that's one thing. Vines, well, let's see, they cover things, don't they? Yes, they block views, they cover fences, maybe a chain link fence, maybe an arbor, a trellis, a wall. Yeah, so vines really come in handy. And there are evergreen vines, there are deciduous vines, there are annual vines, there are perennial vines, you name it. We're going to look at them. So let's see what we have here. Yes, well, these are D-vine plants, yes, for vertical spaces. And let me get out of everybody's way here. So, okay, well, annual vines, those that just last a particular growing season. We usually plant these in the spring. They do something for us during the summer, and then they die when a freeze comes. So here's a good one, cardinal vine. This is a very dainty, fragile vine. It's vigorous, though. It's vigorous. Deeply lobed or dissected leaves. This does well in full sun to partial shade, well-drained moist soils, and attracts hummingbirds big time. So this is the vine to have in your yard if you want hummingbirds. One of several vines, actually, but this is a good annual vine. The flowers are rich in nectar. They like the red flowers, so it's a good vine for a hummingbird garden. And here's its cousin, the cypress vine, even more finely dissected leaves, very delicate, dainty leaves that look something like a cypress foliage, but again, the same red flower. You'll have hummingbirds all over this vine during the summer and fall. Dutchman's pipe. Well, this is native to Costa Rica, so I would not say it's particularly cold hardy here. In fact, I say that it's not cold hardy here. But you can put this out for the summer, as we have at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden, in a courtyard, and it did very well for us. It's an interesting plant, fast growing, takes light shade to full sun. Foul smelling flowers. How do you like that? Foul smelling flowers. Yes, you need some of those in your landscape, don't you? Well, here's the one for you then, but it will not survive the winter, so just enjoy it for the summer. And I do believe that is a host plant for something. So anyway, hyacinth bean. All right, who grew these years ago? Which president grew these? Which president grew these? Our third president, Thomas Jefferson, right? Yes, at Monticello. Yes, he was a plantsman. He grew these at Monticello. So this one rarely gets 10 feet tall, but I'm glad to see that so many of you have grown them as well. That is good, yes. It takes any well-drained soil, full sun, it's drought tolerant. This also attracts hummingbirds and butterflies. And again, the dry seeds should be cooked in 2 changes of water before eating. Well, I've eaten them raw myself, but and I survive. Yeah, okay. But anyway, purple flowers. The tops of the leaves are green. The undersides are purple. Purple petioles. It's a very attractive plant. Looks pretty in the landscape, and it easily fills space within a growing season. So. Morning glory, absolutely beautiful. These are fun for kids and grandchildren to grow. It's a good lesson for them in watching, planting a seed, watching something germinate and then bloom at the end of the season. These will get at least 10 feet tall. Makes a nice temporary screen during the growing season. Full sun, well-drained soil. Often you have to wait until the end of the summer, though, for them to bloom. Mine started blooming about September or October, but when they did, they were spectacular. So there's a variety called Heavenly Blue that's really pretty. Well, I don't have a picture of it, but anyway, that's probably it right there. But that was a real good one for me, Heavenly Blue. Some other very pretty patterns and colors out there. So let your kids or grandkids plant these and enjoy them. Okay, well, let's look at some perennial or woody vines. These are those that persist and get woody. Some of them are deciduous, some are evergreen. Anyway, here's one that we have at the Botanic Garden. We've had this for several years. It's the American wisteria, not the Chinese, but the American wisteria. It is a deciduous vine. It flowers after the foliage emerges. The Chinese wisteria blooms before the foliage emerges. This blooms afterwards. So it's a little later in the spring. The flowers are 4 to 6 inches long. They persist for 2 to 3 weeks. It's a more restrained climber than the Chinese wisteria. So it won't get out of hand the way the other one does. And it takes full sun to light shade as it gets in this courtyard here. And there's a picture of the flower. It's really very pretty. So that's a good one to consider. Boston ivy. Well, yes, this is a deciduous vine. Grows on the colleges back east. We can grow it here. The one problem it has here is with lace bugs. They like to feed on the undersides of the leaves during the summer. And I always tell myself to apply some sort of a systemic insecticide about early to mid-season, but I never do. I always forget. So the lace bugs always move in, and whiteflies like this as well. But they will feed on the undersides of the leaves and create stippled, kind of a stippled appearance on the leaves, and then eventually the leaves start dropping. So anyway, kind of a sad story. But if you applied a soil drench May, June, early in the season, I think that would become a part of the plant system, and it would fend off those whiteflies and lace bugs when they come, and your foliage will last longer. I just need to remind myself to do that. But anyway, we've had this on walls at the Botanic Garden for years. I have it on a wall at my house. It's very pretty. The leaves are beautiful. 3 points to the leaf. Does well in full sun or part shade or part sun, and the fall color is beautiful. So it's really very pretty. So do consider that one. And there you see the very attractive foliage, the 3 points, tricuspidata, 3 cups in a sense, or 3 points to that leaf. Very attractive. Now here's something to consider though. Before you put a vine on your house, you do need to think twice, because if you should ever want to remove that vine, what might be left behind? The roots, the little, the attachments, where the tendrils attached, all that business. So think twice before you put a vine on your house. If you ever should remove it, you'll have to contend with all the leftovers. Scrape them off, scrub them off, whatever. But anyway, the nice thing about a vine, a deciduous vine, is that it's very energy efficient. During the summer, it cools the house, and then during the summer, the leaves drop, and the warmth can come through and warm the house. So it's an ideal plant for energy savings, if you will. The deciduous vines. All right, Carolina yellow jessamine. I was talking to a lady that moved here from Tyler. So anyway, yeah, these are beautiful in East Texas. But we can grow them well here in Dallas-Fort Worth. Sometimes they can be a little sensitive to our highly alkaline soils. They might look a little chlorotic. But anyway, it's an evergreen vine, 10 to 20 feet tall. Blooms March and April, just beautiful. Those yellow flowers, very pretty, trumpet-shaped. Full sun to light shade. All parts are poisonous if eaten, okay? So you don't want to eat them. Don't put them in a salad. Don't let kids or grandkids eat the foliage. But it's a very pretty vine. It climbs by wrapping around something. It does not attach. It has to wrap around. So it needs some sort of support, a trellis, an arbor, guy wires or something to wrap around. This is really nice on arbors, things like that. Very pretty vine. And then here is the Chinese wisteria, beautiful in the spring. We have a colonnade between our oval rose garden and the lower rose garden. Very historic. Those columns have been there since the 30s. They are the original columns, and they are covered with the Chinese wisteria. And they're just beautiful in the spring. Nothing prettier, really. It's a vigorous vine, and that's vigorous with a capital V. So you can see how tall they get. Flowers appear before the foliage emerges. Spectacular in the early spring. And again, they may experience some iron deficiency in our alkaline soils. It will cover trees. Yes, I mean, they can escape and just go haywire, crawl over, cover over everything. So keep them restrained on an arbor, trellis, a certain structure, and you'll be fine. All right, clematis, absolutely beautiful. Really pretty up north and back east. We can grow them here. We have some at the Botanic Garden now, I do believe. One of the prettiest combinations we ever had back in the days of roses. Yes, back in the days of roses, before rosette virus came through, although we still have roses in the garden. But anyway, in the Fuller Garden, we've got some beautiful arched trellises, and we had New Dawn rose on there. just a light pale pink. And then we used the clematis as a companion plant, wrapping around the canes. So actually the canes of the roses were the support for these clematis. And it was very pretty, because they would be blooming about the same time. So you had a double effect there, clematis on the canes and then roses up above on the trellises. So you might consider that combination. The thing about a clematis is, always remember this, head in the sun, feet in the shade. The foliage and the flowers up in the sun, and then if you can provide some shade to the roots, some shrubs or grasses or something down below to keep that ground shaded and cool, they like that. Certainly keep them mulched. But there's some beautiful varieties, all colors, early, mid, late season, and so forth, but really very pretty. So you might want to try your hand at growing some of those. Coral honeysuckle. This is one of our native vines. Semi-evergreen, 10 to 20 feet tall. It is native to Texas. Blooms early to mid-spring, and it attracts hummingbirds big time. They love this. So this is an early bloomer for us, and hummingbirds will come through and visit your yard and then stay for the summer. And hummingbirds come back to the same place the following year. So have some of these in your landscape to attract the hummingbirds on their spring migration. You want to plant these, I would say, in full sun where there is good air circulation, because if they're in a shady place, too shady, or if there's not much air circulation, the foliage is susceptible to powdery mildew, which looks like confectioner's sugar on the leaves. So you don't want that. So give it full sun and as much air circulation as possible. Here you see it growing on a split rail fence. That's not at my house, but I do have split rail fencing at my house, and I have growing on that split rail fencing. It's very pretty. It just looks very rustic, very Texas. But the coral red flowers with a little bit of yellow in there, rich in nectar. The hummingbirds love them. And you can cut back, after a while these do get woody, and you can cut them back hard and they'll bounce right back. So, okay, here's the coral vine. Somebody back here was talking to me about coral vine. Yes. Here it is, beautiful. Really, this does very well in South Texas, where it overwinters very well. But this lady back here at the table, yes, raise her hand. There we go. She has successfully grown them here in Grapevine, yes, and overwintered them here. I would say mulch them heavily. Now you can find the roots or the tuber, maybe at garden center or someplace in the spring, and then put them out. But this was one of the best attractions that we had in our courtyard behind the garden center. Absolutely spectacular. These bubblegum pink flowers, chains of pink flowers, were traffic stoppers, show stoppers. And so anyway, if you keep it in the ground, mulch it heavily, and yours might come back as this lady's has come back for her. Otherwise, you could lift the roots and bring them in and plant them again in the spring. But there you see how we had them growing on a trellis in our Lindard courtyard. Very, very pretty. People would stop and just have their pictures made there with the coral wreath, the coral vine and the queen's wreath behind them. So loves the heat, loves the heat. Okay, the cross vine. I really like this one. This is another vine native to East Texas. You see it a lot here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Actually, there are 3 colors. Did you know that? Okay, the species is yellow. The flower is yellow with a rust-colored throat. This beautiful variety here is called Tangerine Beauty, which has an orange flower and a little bit of yellow in the throat. And then there's one called, I think it's Atrosanguinea, something like that. It's blood red, just dark, dark red. It's really very pretty. And we have all 3 colors at the Botanic Garden. So anyway, blooms March, April. Again, this will catch the butterflies on their spring migration. It's an evergreen vine, and this one clings. Definitely clings. I had it on the side of my house, so it will cling to brick, rock, hardy plank, whatever you have. It will certainly grow on a trellis, arbor, any kind of a structure. And the foliage is very attractive, evergreen foliage. Sun to part shade, well-drained soil. You see the 3 colors of flowers there. It blooms heavily in the spring, maybe again lightly in the fall, but for the most part it is a spring bloomer. And here it absolutely covers the foliage on the bridge into the Fuller Garden. So that's always a major attraction in the spring. Okay, English ivy, heterohelix. Well, yes, it is an evergreen vine. You can use this as a ground cover or as a vine. And again, think twice before you put it on your house, because if you pull it off, it will leave little track marks behind on your brick. But it is pretty as a vine. Climbs by aerial roots, does not damage trees, although it may cover all interior branches, as it does, well, right there on that tree there. It does have problems with bacterial leaf spot. That's just one of its issues, but anyway, it's still worth growing. And have you ever seen it bloom? It does bloom. There is the flower. Now, interestingly, what we often find in our landscapes as a ground cover or sometimes as a vine is the juvenile form. But this is the adult form. This has been growing on that tree for such a long time that the ivy has reached its mature form and it is blooming. Now, those flowers look just like the flowers of something else. I'll test you plant people out here. Does that flower look familiar to any other flower? Can you see it? Okay, there's a shrub called the fatsia. Are you familiar with that? Fatsia japonica. Gets about 4 feet tall, has large tropical-looking palmate leaves. It also blooms in the winter, and it has flowers just like that. These little white knobby flowers. Very interesting. So I thought that was interesting that they have similar flower structures. And you can cross the shrub fatsia with English ivy. In fact, there is a cross. It's called fat shedera. Okay, fatsia with hedera makes a fat shedera. And I'll show you one of the. I'll show you the cross. That vine is in this presentation. So anyway, here's the evergreen clematis. I showed you the deciduous clematis a while ago, which are beautiful. They're popular up north and back east. I think they struggle a little bit here, but they're still worth growing. But this one grows very well for us here. Does anybody have this one? Yes, we do. Okay, we have a few of you out there. It's a beautiful evergreen vine. I just put one on a trellis on the side of my house so I don't have to look at my neighbor's air conditioner through my kitchen window. Yeah. So anyway, this is native to China. Again, head in the sun, feet in the shade. Evergreen foliage, very handsome in its own right. The flowers appear late winter, maybe late February, March, maybe for 2 weeks or so. Creamy white, they smell like vanilla. Really very nice. And then the rest of the year you have that very attractive evergreen foliage that hides, covers, and screens, which is why I put it on the trellis to hide my view from the kitchen window of the neighbor's air conditioning unit. Yeah. So here you see the foliage. The leaves are about 4 inches long, very attractive. They do give it some sort of support. It does not cling. It has to wrap around something. Okay, the evergreen wisteria. Does anybody have this one? Oh, this lady grows everything, yes, and you do too. All right, well, this is a Millettia reticulata. It is evergreen and gets a good 15 feet tall or so, blooms late summer to fall. So leather-like green foliage all year round, and then July, August, you see these reddish-purple clusters of flowers appear. I think they smell like mothballs. But I like that smell. It cleanses your nasal passage. So, yeah. But they're really very pretty. The dark colors recede, so you have to be close to it to really appreciate the beauty of the flowers. But they're there. And this needs a very sturdy support. Very sturdy support. We had one growing on a trellis at the garden for years, and one day the support just collapsed out from under the weight of the wisteria. Well, it was an old wooden structure anyway, but the vine itself was heavy, it was very woody. So now, well, I think I have a picture here. Yeah, we went in with this huge steel structure, you know, this mother of all trellises now, that's not going anywhere. And so we have it growing on either side of the entrance to the Fuller Garden. So, yeah, give it a good, sturdy structure. Here's the fat shedera. There you go. That's the cross between fatsia, the shrub, and hedera, helix, English ivy. And you get this wonderful vine here, upright, semi-climbing habit, 5 to 6 feet tall, evergreen, green leaves with creamy white margins. Really very pretty. I like this. Very slow growing. We have it growing here on this fence here. I've also seen it featured in large pots growing on a tripod. So if you have a north-facing door or entrance or a shady porch, you could grow this in a large pot on a tripod. Put 3 of them in the pot, have them grow up that tripod. You've got something very pretty, very colorful, and evergreen that will accent your door or your entryway. So consider this one, Fat Cedera. It's a good one. Japanese hydrangea vine. Well, I wish this had been more successful at the garden than it was. It met its fate, but we tried it. You know, sometimes you just have to try things. And I liked the sound of this. Deciduous, 20 to 30 feet tall, creamy flower clusters. Roseum has pink flowers, and there it was growing for a while, but it just didn't take off. So I really can't heartily recommend it for our area. But there you see the flowers. That really would have been very pretty growing on a wall. I think this would do much better farther east and north of here. What? Bouchard Gardens, yes, absolutely. Anything grows there. Anything grows there. Yes. So anyway, here's Mandevilla. This is one that grows for us. Now this needs a support. It has to wrap around something. This is a tropical vine. So you buy this in May in the garden centers, April, May, put it out for the summer only. But it's really very pretty. Here it is growing at the Dallas Arboretum. Morning sun, afternoon shade, blooms all season, trumpet-shaped flowers, red, white, pink. We've always featured some in the Fuller Garden. So it's ideal for large pots or hanging baskets. Very nice, very tropical for the summer landscape. And there you see a close-up of the flowers, large, showy, trumpet-shaped flowers. Passion vine. I'm sure some of you grow this one, right? Some of you with butterfly gardens, because this is a great host plant for the Gulf fritillary. It's a pretty vine too, but just plant enough of them because the Gulf fritillaries will consume a lot of the foliage. So anyways, the deciduous vine, 8 to 12 feet tall, full to part sun, evenly moist soil, absolutely beautiful flowers. Look at that, spectacular. So put that on a trellis or an arbor. Again, it will attract the caterpillars of the Gulf fritillary, so it is a host plant. Poison ivy. Is anybody growing this one? Let me extol the virtues of this vine. It's native to Texas. Native to Texas, yes. We like native plants here, right? Have you seen the variegated variety? There's a variegated variety. Beautiful fall color. Absolutely beautiful. But it could rub you the wrong way. Yes, as it did a young scout in the month of May when I was in Boy Scouts. Toby went into the woods to do his business and did not take any toilet paper. Reached for some nearby foliage, only to discover that it was poison ivy. So anyway, yes, he was in the hospital for a while. I'll never forget Toby. But anyway.
That falls under too much information.
Yes, too much information. There we go. Yes. So anyway, all parts are poisonous to most people. I know there's some people that are resistant to this. But anyway, I do remember some things from the Boy Scout handbook. Berries white, poisonous site. You know, that's one thing to remember because there you see the berries in there and they do turn white. Leaflets 3, let it be, poison oak or poison ivy. You shake hands with somebody, people have 5 fingers, so it's safe to shake hands, it's safe to touch something with 5 leaflets, such as Virginia creeper, but if it has 3 leaflets, it's not safe. So just a couple of things to remember about poison ivy, and yes, by all means, if you have it in your landscape, you probably want to get rid of it. Okay, I threw in a few roses. Well, let me tell you the story about that. You know about rose rosette virus. Yeah, we've all dealt with that. So anyway, well, we had roses at the Botanic Garden, and well, we had this garden called the Rose Garden. Yeah. So we had to remove all the roses, and we did so in 2015. We went through all of 16 with not a single rose in the garden. We planted lots of annuals in the Rose Garden. The brides did not complain. They were happy because there was lots of color out there in the beds, not from roses, but from annuals. Well, then we started planting a few roses in the fall of 16 and then again in 17. And then in October of 17, we rededicated our rose garden. I think it was 50 years to the day after it was first dedicated back in the 30s. So that was historic. But we do feel obligated to have roses in this rose garden because there's a sign up at the top of the hill, and really it's carved in stone. It says Rose Garden. So for that reason, we do grow roses at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden. Climbing Pinky was a good climber for us. It's one of the Texas Superstar roses. Earthkind Rose, yes, semi-double pink flowers. I had this one at home. Anyway, it was a very good one. So we just treat roses, well, almost as annuals. We keep them out there for as long as they're healthy, and if we see the symptoms of rose rosette virus, we'll just pull them up and replace them. So that's our policy. So enjoy them as long as you can, and once they get the disease, you just pull them out and replace. This was another good rose for us, the Lady Banks rose, yellow roses all along the fence there that we had on Old Garden Road. These would bloom in the spring, no thorns. It was a very nice rose. And then, of course, New Dawn. And we are growing this one, again, in the Fuller Garden. We have some very nice arched trellises in the Fuller Garden. And this is, here you see them growing on those trellises, just beautiful. And it was with this rose that we combined the clematis. It was really very pretty. The clematis wrapping around the canes of New Dawn. Nice double effect. So enjoy them while you can. Star or Confederate jasmine. This is a ground cover or a vine. We've grown it as both at the Botanic Garden. It can be set back by really cold weather. You might lose the top growth, but it should be root hardy and it will bounce back. Foliage will come out as it has for us. Blooms in April, just like clockwork. Very fragrant flowers, extremely fragrant. White pinwheel-shaped flowers. It's very nice. So again, on a trellis, it needs some sort of support as a vine. So an arbor trellis or something, or as a ground cover. And then, of course, the sweet autumn clematis. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, yes. Many of us have that in our landscapes. Native to Japan. It has really escaped cultivation here in many places, not as bad as kudzu, but we have it growing wild in places in the garden. But it's really a very nice vine that blooms late August, September. It just tells you that summer is on its way out and fall is around the corner. And those white flowers and that vanilla fragrance, it's really nice at that time of the year. It's just refreshing. But this is a vine. It is annual. It will easily cover a trellis, fence, arbor within a season. So at the end of the season, after a hard freeze, you can cut it back really down to the roots. And then the following spring, it will leaf out, bounce back, and again, cover that fence, arbor, or trellis within a growing season. It's very vigorous. So anyway, yes, vigorous should be underlined, yes, and capitalized. Well, there you see it, where it has escaped cultivation at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden. But it's really pretty, and that fragrance is nice in the air. Trumpet vine. Well, yes, we have a native trumpet vine that can take over the world, but we don't have those growing at the Botanic Garden. We have tamed and named varieties. But anyway, the vine itself is deciduous. It needs a support. We have them growing on these arched trellises in the Fuller Garden. And these flowers do attract hummingbirds. Again, the flowers are trumpet-shaped. They're orange or red. Those colors attract hummingbirds. So it climbs by aerial roots, spreads by root sprouts, yes. Full sun, even poor soil. You see three varieties here, Crimson, Flava, Madame Galen. I've got some pictures here. There's Crimson. It's a darker orange, almost red. There's the Flava. I like that one. It's an apricot color flower, very pretty. And here's the Madame Galen. She's a cross between the Chinese trumpet vine and our native species. It's a mannerly climber, very large, showy flowers that attract hummingbirds, and it doesn't take over the world the way the native species does. So this is a good one. It's a very tame vine with big, showy flowers. Virginia creeper. Well, this is another native vine that we have that sometimes people confuse with poison ivy, but poison ivy has 3 leaflets. Virginia creeper has 5. All right? So this is one of the first vines to color up in the fall. It gets a good 40 to 50 feet tall. It often runs up the trunks of trees. We have it growing on pecan trunks and along pecan branches, and it's just beautiful in the fall when it bursts into color, and then the foliage of the trees follow suit, and you've got that combination of vine and tree foliage. It's really very pretty. The berries are good for birds, but not for humans. It is difficult to remove, so think twice before you put it on a building, your house, or whatever. Full sun to shade, drought tolerant. There are a couple of varieties there that have smaller leaves. They just stay closer to the brick or to the surface than the species. The species can grow out a good, 6-8 inches or so. But Engelmannii and Hacienda creeper grow closer to the brick and just look tamer. So you see the excellent fall color there. I know that's October because the asters are blooming. Asters bloom in October. And so there you have the Virginia creeper covering that building and giving us lots of fall color. And there you see the fall color of Virginia creeper. Really very pretty. And again, this is a very energy efficient vine because it will cover the building during the summer and cool or shade the building, and then in the winter the leaves drop and let in the warmth. So that's the beauty of a deciduous vine. And there you see the smaller leafed varieties. They hug the brick closer. They don't stick out as much, so it looks nice. And that is the end of the program. So I guess I will, do I entertain questions later? Okay.